Good evening and Merry Christmas. Welcome to my channel. This is Stone Gas Man live from New York City, and I'm excited to be here tonight for a 50th anniversary audio commentary for Hal Ashby's Harold and Maude, released on December 20th, 1971. And we're going to talk about the film as we do the commentary, as well as talk about the physical media releases that have come about over the years. And so I, I'm just going to say off the bat right now because I do think this is the best film of 1971. Of all the films I've seen from that year, this is definitely my personal favorite. But on top of all that, it's also my number three movie of all time after Best Years of Our Lives and Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. So, yeah, I have Harold and Maude in a special place in my heart. And, I've every time I watch it, it's just a magical experience. But before we begin, and I am paused at the Paramount logo for anybody that wants to sync up and everything. Um, so one thing I wanted to mention is that this Christmas night on December 25th, I will be doing a double audio commentary. I haven't chosen the time yet. It will probably be about 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. that evening, but I plan on doing audio commentary for two movies. The Ref, starring Dennis Leary, which is a comedy from 1994, and also Black Christmas from 1974, directed by Bob Clark. It is a annual tradition for me to watch Black Christmas every December 25th, along with a few other special movies like It's a Wonderful Life and just a few movies. I also watch a movie called Lay Girl with Mitzi Gaynor and Gene Kelly. Watch that in the morning, and then we do the good stuff in the afternoon with the horror and everything. But yeah, Saturday night, December 25th, probably about 8 p.m. I will be doing the Ref, and then I will be doing Black Christmas. But tonight, like I said, very excited to do this commentary for Harold and Maude, and we'll talk about the Blu-rays and everything. But you know what? I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. Let's do this. Okay. I am currently paused at the Paramount logo. So I'll give everybody out there just a few more seconds. Anybody that's in the chat, please say hi and everything. I'm looking forward to sharing your opinions on Harold and Maude and everything. And yeah, this is a very interesting movie in film history. So really looking forward to it. So at any rate, Paramount logo will start on the count of three. Three, two, one, and play. And so this is a early Paramount logo from the early 1970s. I don't think I've done a Paramount movie this year on my commentaries for 50th anniversary, but at any rate, so as stated in the commentary on the new Paramount Blu-ray, which I picked up just a few days ago, um, on the commentary track, they cite this as one of the great openings of all time, and I am 100% in agreement. This opening is so perfect, so pitch perfect in every way. The marriage of music and cinema has rarely been as powerful and as penetrating as it has been in this opening sequence because somebody just came down the stairs. We haven't seen his face. We have no idea who this person is. And right when they get to the bottom of the stairs, each of the shoes are lined up to the names Harold and Maude. And as you can see, he's putting a record in what we used to call a phonograph. I mean, people still play records, I know, but it's become a kind of niche thing. Um, but we follow this guy. We still haven't seen his face. He sits down. He he takes out a marker and he writes something on a card. And here again, we have no idea who this guy is, what he's doing. Songs performed by Cat Stevens. That's very important to remember as Yeah, every song in this movie is pretty much Cat Stevens, one of the great British singers who in the 1970s got in because of the great British invasion with the Beatles and everything with that era. But interestingly enough, originally this role and the music was meant to be all done by Elton John, of all people. Elton John was who the director pursued to not only play Harold, but also to put in all these songs. And they were really trying to get Elton John, but luckily they didn't. I think it would have been a much different, and I don't know. I like Elton John's music, but I just don't know if it would have worked combined with Colin Higgins's original screenplay. But as you can see, he put. We're in a very, very nice house, by the way. This is this almost has the accoutrements of like a mansion or something, and slowly but surely, as he lights these candles, his face is illuminated. And even though you can't really tell on the name tag, he actually wrote his name down there, Harold Chasen. I forget what the middle name is, but and then we see a rope. The camera stops for a moment. We see a harp in the background, a giant harp. The camera pans down all the way back down to his feet as we started at before. And as he moves slowly forward, it gets really, really dark. And here again, we have no idea what this guy is doing. Written by Colin Higgins. We'll talk about him later. Produced by Colin Higgins and Charles B. Mulvihill. He gets on a chair or a stand actually, and is and the music cuts off. That's the end of the record, and as we can see, he hung himself. And this was the moment when this came out on December 20th of 1971. People were either disgusted and walked out, or they decided to keep going and wondering where this is going, because as we can see, there's this woman coming in. She's noticing Harold, we're not in. She's about to identify him as Harold. But is this Maude? No, we don't know yet. I suppose you think that's very funny, Harold. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, that is Harold Chasen, who just quote unquote hung himself. But as we will see, it is just to get his mother's attention, which she seems to be preoccupied with other things. I'm not sure if you noticed, but on the phone, that really sounded like a very masculine voice, even though she's supposed to be talking to a she, I believe. But at any rate, this is Bud Cort as Harold Chasen, and this is, in fact, his on-screen mother, played by Vivian Pickles. And they both give excellent performances in this movie. But now that this wonderful opening is out of the way, and do try to be a bit more vivacious. I love that. As this opening is now finished, we will talk about how this movie came about. Well, evidently, Colin Higgins, who is later became a director, he directed Foul Play in 1978. He also did 9 to 5, which was a huge hit in 1980. And he was involved in a number of big films before sadly dying in the late 80s due to AIDS. And in fact, sadly, the director, Hal Ashby, died in the late 80s too, both very, very young. Hal Ashby and Colin Higgins, the writer, yeah, they both died very, very young. But this script was written by Colin Higgins when he was a senior in film school. And this was essentially his senior thesis. This screenplay of a young 20-year-old obsessed with death who stages these suicide scenes to get his mother's attention, because she seems to be, very rich and concerned about dinner parties and about, socializing with friends and doing her, doing that kind of thing. And he is just kind of lost in this in this world where he's very unhappy, and he's just trying to, get his mother's attention. But what I like about these early scenes is that, if you notice, in the first 30 minutes before he meets Maude, his face looks like it's very, very pale. In fact, in a lot of these scenes, and in the scene with the psychiatrist coming up here in a minute, yeah, director Hal Ashby instructed the makeup person to this white pale uh, makeup on his face. And over time, he's supposed to get warmer and warmer and warmer on the inside, thus illuminating color back into his face. But here's one of the great jokes in this movie, which I'm not sure how many people picked up on when this first came out. But as you can see, Harold and the psychiatrist are both wearing the exact same clothes, right down to the shoes, the pants, the jacket, the tie, all exactly the same. And I love how this is Harold's way of almost mocking the profession of psychiatry, and how this is pretty much like a waste of time for him. But the psychiatrist says, "So what do you do for fun? What do you do? Anything?" And he just says, "I just go to funerals." Oh, wow. Yeah, so a young man who's obsessed with death and attends funerals that that he has no reason or no reason to be there at all, except that he's obsessed with death. The man selling the car here was actually producer Charles B. Mulvihill. Uh, he was actually the producer on this thing after another producer connected with the studio left. And so they replaced him with Chuck Mulvihill, who had been around since the very beginning when uh, the script got to the studio at Paramount. But as this started, like I said, Colin Higgins, he wrote the screenplay as a senior thesis for his, film school and everything. And he was working as a pool boy for this woman named Mildred Harris and her husband. And they read the script, they adored it, and they went to Paramount with it, and they sold it to Charles Evans, Robert Evans, excuse me, Robert Evans of the famous head of production at Paramount, and he loved the script, but he was only willing to put up $1 million for it. The reason being is because, well, as you can imagine, with this premise that this 20-year-old kid obsessed with death falls in love with a 79-year-old free spirit played by Ruth Gordon, who is introduced right here. And this type of premise would have terrified any major studio, particularly at that time. Uh, and in fact, when Paramount eventually knew what Robert Evans was producing here, they were terrified about releasing this movie. But so, but Colin Higgins wanted to direct his own script. He was confident enough that he, could pull this off, not only, shepherding the script through production and then and of course post production, but of course serving as the director. But Paramount decided they gave him a screen test, they gave him a shot, and they didn't like the screen test, so they brought in Hal Ashby. Now, who is Hal Ashby? Well, Hal Ashby, started out as an editor. And in fact, he won the Academy Award for editing for the 1967 Best Picture winner In the Heat of the Night, directed by his mentor, Norman Jewison. And Jewison had a project after in the Heat of the Night, which Ashby thought it would be the perfect opportunity to get into directing. And that would be Ashby's debut film, The Landlord, starring Beau Bridges, Lee Grant, and also Louis Gossett Jr. is in this movie. This is actually a really good first film from Hal Ashby, where Beau Bridges plays a wealthy young man who leaves his family's estate in Long Island to pursue love and happiness in a Brooklyn ghetto. Very progressive for 1970 and everything. And this Blu-ray from Kino Lorber just came out last year. This was a title that Hal Ashby fans have been clamoring for years, because the DVD from MGM was long out of print and everything. If you're a Hal Ashby fan, you should already have this in your collection. And it's got some great interviews. Norman Jewison is interviewed, and Lee Grant is interviewed, and Beau Bridges is interviewed. So great film, The Landlord. Check that out. And it was based on the minor success of The Landlord, that Paramount went to Hal Ashby and said, "Hey, would you like to do Harold and Maude?" And he said, "You know what? I like the script. I mean, Ashby really loved the script when he first read it, but he also knew that Colin Higgins, who wrote this, that he wanted to direct it. So he actually told Paramount. Hal Ashby actually told Paramount, no, give him a shot." Hal Ashby was always known for giving newbies first time shots on films. In fact, John Alonzo, who is the DP on this, he originally they wanted Gordon Willis from The Landlord, which is his first movie that I just showed you. But because of union regulations, they weren't able to get him from New York to join in on this West Coast shoot. This was all filmed in San Francisco, by the way. And so, yeah, The Landlord, with Hal Ashby and The Landlord, Paramount thought, hey, he is an ideal person to direct Harold and Maude, because he probably gets the script. And, very, very long shot. In fact, this movie was over 3 hours long initially, and Hal Ashby did a miracle and actually chopped this all the way down to 91 minutes of sheer perfection. Seriously. And as you can see, here's another here's another way of him trying to get his mother's attention by just holding his breath for what seems like forever. I mean, and then we're back in the psychiatrist's office again. But yeah, Hal Ashby came from Norman Jewison's circle, because he had won the Oscar for In the Heat of the Night. So, and this shot, this was a relatively, this was a very low budget film. Paramount wanted to keep it under wraps, or rather, Robert Evans wanted to keep it under wraps because of the premise, the very dark premise, and just for the fact that it was a very strange production from the get-go. And the test screenings were fabulous. They were actually very highly enthusiastic. But as any filmmaker will tell you, test screenings mean nothing. I mean, I learned a lot from Robert Zemeckis and his commentaries, because his first two films are I Want to Hold Your Hand, about the Beatles, and also Used Cars with Kurt Russell, two great all-American comedies. They both had sensational test screenings in terms of numbers, in terms of positive responses, biggest responses that the studios had ever seen at that time. And unfortunately, they bombed at the box office, and that was the same way with Harold and Maude. Harold and Maude was a massive, massive bomb. I mean, looking up the history of this movie and what eventually happened after it came out is so sad. It got hardly any positive notice from any nationwide critic. Time didn't even bother reviewing it. And this was a situation where Paramount really wanted to release The Godfather over the Christmas holidays, but Francis Ford Coppola hadn't finished it yet. And as many people know, it wasn't released until March of 1972. So they thought they could get away, based on these test screenings. Paramount thought they could get away with releasing Harold and Maude in, every theater in town that was supposed to get The Godfather, and nobody saw it. Nobody came to see it. It was embarrassing how much it just empty theaters. Now, according to the commentators on the brand new Paramount Blu-ray, which I'll get to in a minute, but according to them, it did play well enough in a few cities, like Detroit. It played well. Paris, it played well. Minneapolis, it played well. It actually played for 3 years straight in Minneapolis. It had done well in a few cities, like better than expected. And so what happened was is that Harold and Maude, while it bombed completely at theaters, it was completely ignored. I mean, that's the thing. It wasn't so much the fact that it got terrible reviews, but it was also just ignored. It really felt like that this is a film that the public had no idea of its existence until years later, because it would take about 3 years until 1974, where Paramount finally decided to give it a re-release due to the popular reception in Minneapolis, and it did better, but it didn't start to make a profit until the early 1980s. Paramount, I mean, to give Paramount credit, they didn't give up on this movie. And, in fact, I mean, despite the fact they only gave it a bare bones DVD release in the early 2000s, or actually it might have been 98 or 99, I think they put out that standard DVD. Um, that's all they did for Harold and Maude. But also to be perfectly honest, Paramount has always, I felt, been behind the curve a little bit when it comes to physical media, and especially bonus features on physical media. But what happened was is that eventually the film got on the AFI list, number 45 on the AFI list. Eventually, it got chosen by the Congress to be preserved, and like I said, it became one of the most famous of all cult films. In fact, to many people, this is the quintessential cult movie, maybe next to Rocky Horror Picture Show or Take Your Pick. I actually do think this is the original cult movie. I mean, you can make arguments for any movie made before Harold and Maude in 1971, but it's fascinating how nobody saw this film. Like I said, it was in theaters everywhere. Nobody went to see it. Empty theater, empty weekends. Can you imagine that? Roger Ebert famously wrote a very, very negative review on this movie that for some reason it didn't get published until after the holidays. Like I said, this was released 5 days before Christmas in 1971. And Roger Ebert, of all people, wrote this vicious review that was so dismissive. And I mean, that's the thing, is that him and like a lot of the other critics just hated the movie. But there were small pockets around the world, not just the US, but also in Paris and a few other places, small pockets where people discovered the movie, they fell in love with the movie, they brought friends to see the movie, and ultimately, like I said, 50 years later, it has gone from being completely obscure. And luckily, Hal Ashby directed more movies after Harold and Maude. Very, very luckily, because he made, of course, 7 films in the 1970s, all of which are considered masterpieces or near masterpieces. Like I said, 1970 started out with The Landlord, Harold and Maude, 1971, The Last Detail in 1973, which I can't wait to do a commentary on The Last Detail, because this is hands down the greatest movie about Navy enlisted ever made. It's one of my favorite Jack Nicholson movies. Like I said, this came out in 73. And was a hit for Columbia Pictures, even though they hated the amount of language in it. They really did not like the amount of profanity in The Last Detail. But then eventually Ashby went on to do Shampoo, which was produced by Warren Beatty and starring Beatty and Goldie Hawn, which was a huge hit as well. And then he did Bound for Glory, which is a very underrated film from 1976, as you can see right here, starring David Carradine as singer-songwriter Woody Guthrie, and how he got through the Great Depression. Great movie that here again, like all of Ashby's movies, doesn't get discussed nearly enough. And then finally in 1978, he did Coming Home with Jane Fonda and Jon Voight, which won them both Oscars, as well as the screenplay won an Oscar as well. And then finally in 1979, he did Being There with Peter Sellers. So all 7 of those films, and if you want to include it in the heat of the night too, even though that was 67, that there has been no other consecutive run of films that I can think of by any director, by any filmmaker that could match that. And look, I mean, and on the commentary on the new Paramount Blu-ray, they talk about, well, wait a minute. I mean, Coppola got his due. Uh, Other people like Spielberg and other directors in the 70s got their due, De Palma and everything. Why wasn't Hal Ashby given his due? Now, there was a documentary about Hal Ashby that came out a couple years ago. Highly recommend everybody check that out. It's called Hal. And there's also a great book out there by Nick Redman, who also participated in the commentary for the Criterion version of Harold and Maude. And this particular version, of course, had a new digital restoration. It had a audio commentary with the producer Charles B. Mulvihill, and of course, Hal Ashby biographer Nick Dawson. I screwed up that name earlier, and I mentioned somebody else I got confused with. I apologize. But yeah, it's got an audio commentary by them, and also audio excerpts from seminars with Hal Ashby and writer-producer Colin Higgins, and also a 11-minute interview with songwriter Yusuf Katz Stevens, and also a booklet featuring an essay by film critic Matt Zoller Seitz, who now runs RogerEbert.com, a 1971 New York Times profile of star Ruth Gordon, and 2 excerpted interviews, one from 97 with star Bud Cort and cinematographer John Alonzo, and one from 2001 with executive producer Mildred Lewis. So this was more or less the definitive edition of Harold and Maude to come out on physical media until it went out of print. And it's been out of print actually for a few years now. But luckily, Paramount was paying attention. Luckily, they were paying attention. And they, in response, put out a brand new Blu-ray. Now, this Blu-ray was released only a few weeks ago, literally only a few weeks ago. And yeah, and this is taken from a 4K restoration, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, let me just double check here. So, okay, but yeah, this brand new Harold and Maude Blu-ray. Let's see. Yes, exclusive new 4K restoration of the film, newly remixed soundtrack, theatrical trailers, a collectible packaging featuring the fold-out image of the film's theatrical poster and interior spread with key movie moments, which I don't have near me at the moment. I forgot to bring it over here, but the main thing about this Blu-ray release, which I want to share more than anything in the world, is that there's a brand new audio commentary with 2 of my favorite people in the film business that you could imagine. Writer-director Cameron Crowe, who of course did Fast Times at Ridgemont High, wrote that for director Amy Heckerling in Universal, but he later, of course, did Say Anything, which is a masterpiece, I think. Almost Famous, Vanilla Sky, Jerry Maguire, and Elizabethtown. Many, many, many great movies. And he does the commentary here along with screenwriter Larry Karaszewski, who co-wrote Ed Wood with his partner Scott Alexander, as well as The People versus Larry Flint. So one of my favorite screenwriters and one of my favorite directors did a commentary for one of my top 3 movies of all time. So this is, in fact, I think the Blu-ray release of the year, as far as I'm concerned. If you've never seen Harold and Maude, this is the way to do it. I mean, if you didn't get the opportunity to pick up that Criterion edition, get this Paramount edition as soon as possible, because it looks great, it sounds great, the music is wonderful in this new edition, and it looks pretty much the same as the Criterion version, but of course it's given this 4K upgrade, which is awesome. But yeah, so it took a long, long, long time for Harold and Maude to finally get its due, critically and otherwise. And now it's considered an American classic, and rightfully so. Uh, they mentioned that several times on the commentary. Scott Alexander, I mean, excuse me, Larry Karaszewski and Cameron Crowe. They mentioned that several times. In fact, they think it's gone beyond its cult status at this point, and now it's just an American classic, hands down. Now, but going back to the question mark of why Hal Ashby isn't as considered as um, of all the other filmmakers from the 1970s, why he was never talked about in that group, which included Coppola and De Palma and Lucas and Spielberg. Why was he never talked about? It's a very good question. Well, they try to attempt to answer that question in the commentary, and what they uh, determined, or at least what Larry Karaszewski seems to think, is that all the films that he made in the 1970s were other people's projects. The Landlord was Norman Jewison. Harold and Maude was Colin Higgins. The Last Detail was, well, Last Detail is based on a book. Hal Ashby didn't have anything to do with the writing. Shampoo was a Warren Beatty's project. And then, of course, Being There was suggested by Peter Sellers. So all those films were other people's projects. But the other thing is that Hal Ashby is now notoriously known as Hollywood's hippie director, because he smoked a lot of marijuana. In fact, it is said that he smoked practically all throughout the production phases of his movies, and so this became like a red flag to a lot of studio executives, that he would be in the editing room, just editing and doing what he does best, while having a joint in his mouth and just smoking and smoking and smoking. And so that was Hal Ashby's calling card, I guess you could say, is that he was the hippie director of the Hollywood movie scene in the 1970s. Now, sadly, he had a very, very a very bad decline in the 1980s, because what happened is that in 1982, he was being groomed by Columbia Pictures to take over the directing duties of a screenplay called Tootsie. Now, Tootsie, of course, is one of America's biggest comedies, about Dustin Hoffman becomes a woman because he needs a job. He's an actor, and so he becomes a woman on a soap opera, and becomes like a hit on the air and everything. Well, that became a huge comedy hit in 1982. Ultimately, it was directed by Sidney Pollack. But Hal Ashby was originally supposed to direct that movie. But what happened was he had two movies that were already way behind in post-production through Lorimar Pictures. And nothing had been done on them for months. Secondhand Hearts was the name of one of them, and the other one was called Looking to Get Out. And Looking to Get Out was barely released. I mean, it finally got a DVD release in 2009, when John Voight found a copy of the movie. He was the star. He found a copy of Looking to Get Out when he was doing a screening of it, and realized, oh my God, this is Hal Ashby's movie. This is his director's cut, even though the studio took the movie out of his hands and completely butchered it. And that was the same way through all the four films that he made in the 1980s. He tried his luck with Neil Simon, who wrote The Slugger's Wife in 1984, but unfortunately that was another failure. And then in 1986 was Hal Ashby's last movie. Now, real quick, the ice sculptor here, that is British actor Cyril Cusack. And he actually had a much, much bigger part in this movie. Like I said, this movie was originally 3 hours long until Hal Ashby miraculously managed to cut it down to 91 minutes. And the problem with the 3 hour cut initially was that it was all talk. So much talk, so much dialogue. I mean, the studio executives and I think even the producer, I think, just got so tired of Ruth Gordon's life-inspiring quotes. There was like almost one too many spread out over 3 hour a 3 hour movie, and so some serious editing needed to be done, and that's where Ashby stepped in and took control and managed to get it down to 91 minutes. But sadly, in the mid to late 1980s, his health was declining very, very rapidly. It was said that he, at one point, got addicted to cocaine and that, and everything. And eventually, he just chopped off all his hair. He was almost recognizable. And for the life of me, I don't remember whether I heard the story from Cameron Crowe on this commentary or from somewhere else. But apparently, I think it was Cameron Crowe, but apparently when there was pre-production for Big, the Penny Marshall movie with Tom Hanks, Hal Ashby came in completely unrecognizable. He had short hair, and he wanted to direct the script for Big really, really much, and that probably would have been a cool, interesting project for him. But sadly, he died in December of 1988. He was 59 years old. And here again, he was kind of forgotten about for so many years. I mean, that's what I'm saying, is that Harold and Maude took so long for it to become this American classic, and thus Hal Ashby just his name was just never mentioned. It's amazing. But those 7 films that he made in the 1970s, and we'll throw in The Heat of the Night also in there. They're all must sees. I mean, if you are a student of cinema, or if you have, any love of cinema, and especially of that decade, he is essential. There's no way you can get around 1970s cinema without Hal Ashby. And here again, my personal opinion, if I was, and then of course this movie got no awards, it got no nominations, it got nothing. I was going to say, the first Oscar I would have voted for would be the opening song "Don't Be Shy" by Cat Stevens, which perfectly opens up this movie and how it mirrors all of the actions of Harold on screen. Now, and like I said, I promise we're going to talk about Ruth Gordon and Bud Cort a little bit later, but I think it's important to mention that this movie, like I said, its reputation grew so much over time, and we're very, very grateful that the audience kind of, took the movie back and said, we're sorry we never saw this back when it originally came out. But I can still see people watching this movie being appalled by the the black humor, the suicidal scenes. It's definitely, like they said in the commentary, it's definitely an us versus them movie, where one group will get the movie automatically and revel in it and love it and share it, and the other half will be like, no thank you, no thank you, because as you could say, this could be the definitive movie where definitely for not for all tastes apply. But here again, this is a movie that freaked out the studio. They did not, this really, we're actually releasing a movie with this premise. Yes, you are. But here again, to give Paramount credit, they have eventually come around and recognized the film and its iconic status and everything. Now, Ruth Gordon, we might as well start talking about her now, because most people seem to know Ruth Gordon from the 1968 film Rosemary's Baby, where she, of course, won the Academy Award as the neighbor. But in fact, her career goes all the way back to the silent era. She didn't make a lot of movies, but she did a lot of theater, and she also did a lot of screenwriting. As a matter of fact, she wrote a lot of Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn's movies, like Adam's Rib and stuff like that. Interestingly enough, the first movie, well, it wasn't the first movie I saw her in, but definitely her earliest movie because she did a couple bit parts in the silent era, nothing too substantial, and and then, like I said, she did a lot of theater work. But up until 1940, we had a movie called Abe Lincoln in Illinois, released by RKO Pictures. And it was written by Robert E. Sherwood, who wrote Best Years of Our Lives, four-time Pulitzer Prize winner, speechwriter for Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And Ruth Gordon played Mary Todd Lincoln in Abe Lincoln in Illinois, and she was wonderful. And she did, she did sporadic movies. I mean, she seems to be more well known now for like the Clint Eastwood movies, every which way but loose and any which way you can, which I think is kind of sad because she did so much more than that, so much more than that. But a lot of people of a certain generation who saw those movies when they were kids, I wasn't one of them, that's where they seem to know her from. Honestly, the first movie I ever saw Ruth Gordon in, though, was a little film from the same year of the sequel, Anyway, Which Way You Can. And this movie was called My Bodyguard, where she played the grandmother of Chris Makepeace's character, who was rich, had a swanky hotel that his father ran and everything, and he would go to school and he would be uh, assaulted by these bullies led by Matt Dillon, and he has to hire a huge bodyguard with a questionable past played by Adam Baldwin to protect him. And Ruth Gordon played the grandmother in that movie to Chris Makepeace, and she has several scenes in like the hotel where she was constantly romancing younger men because apparently this movie kind of typecast her to play that kind of role to an extent. But like I said, she did a lot of writing, she did a lot of acting, and she did so much stuff, and she has a very long and distinguished career with the Rosemary's Baby Oscar kind of capping everything off by that time. And Bud Cort is another, Bud Cort is interesting in that he started out working with Robert Altman. In fact, Robert Altman had like saw him in some comedy play out house or something where he had a group of people working with him. In fact, the very first computer date that his mother sets him up with, which unfortunately we've already passed that point, where he starts the fire outside and she freaks out and leaves. She was part of Bud Cort's comedy troupe. Well, Robert Altman liked him and put him in MASH, which was the 1970 movie about the Vietnam War and well, set during the Korean War, but it was about the Vietnam War. Let's be clear. Now, let me stop real quick with Bud Cort and mention that all this driving right here, infamously, Ruth Gordon never drove. She never drove a car. Irony of ironies. She never drove a car. Now, the one that was actually driving the car was her stunt double, who also happened to be the director's girlfriend at the time, Hal Ashby's girlfriend. And so she did all this stunt driving. And, Ruth Gordon, she loved the script. She loved this movie to the very end when she passed away in 1985. And, but she told Hal, just remember, I'm old. I don't want my, my bones breaking easily by doing like stunt driving or anything really, really nuts. So even though all this stuff is really, really funny, the fact that when you realize that Ruth Gordon never really drove it makes these scenes all the more insane when you really think about it. And she how she handles government and police and everything. It's so wonderful, her outlook on life, which is why so many people love her character. But going back to Bud Cort, and interestingly enough, I'm not sure how many people have made this connection, but of course he was in Robert Altman's MASH, and the song that MASH opens up with is called "Suicide is Painless." written by Robert Altman's 14-year-old son, Mike Altman, and performed by Johnny Mandel. Uh, yeah, very interesting that movie is, the lead song is called "Suicide is Painless," and then this movie, which he made just a year later, is about him attempting suicide numerous times to scare his mother. And but he was also in the title role of Brewster McCloud, which is another Robert Altman film. Which, I'll be perfectly honest, I have not seen Brewster McCloud yet. I've heard mixed things about it. I mean, because I like Altman in general, but that's just one I haven't got around to yet. But after Brewster McCloud and after Harold and Maude, Bud Cort didn't do much afterward. As a matter of fact, he had a car accident in 1979, which mangled his face and everything, which is really sad. But since then, he's done voice work. He's kept going in the business despite all these setbacks. And on the commentary with Cameron Crowe and Larry Karaszewski, they mentioned that their theory as to why Bud Cort didn't do anything after Harold and Maude is merely because of the fact that Brewster McCloud and Harold and Maude did not do well at the box office. So he became like, I guess, to the studio's eyes, like a liability. We don't know if he could carry lead roles anymore in feature films. It's kind of sad. I mean, I'm a huge Psycho fan, and apparently he stars in what is probably the worst uh, thing in the Psycho franchise, which is that Bates Motel television pilot that came out in 1986, where he basically inherits the Bates Motel after Norman dies. And it was supposed to be like a pilot for a series where people would visit the hotel every week or something like that. Well, uh, next to the Gus Van Sant remake, that is absolutely without a doubt the worst thing in the Psycho franchise. Uh, but I mean, Bud Cort, one thing that's interesting is that even though he does not participate on this new Paramount Blu-ray, Cameron Crowe does talk about a lot about him doing a screening of Harold and Maude, and he eventually invited Cat Stevens and Bud Cort, and they both showed up. Bud Cort was very last minute. He appeared backstage. He had a daisy in his hand and everything, and here Maude just gets the idea to break out in song just without warning. And this is another original song by Cat Stevens. The two original songs by Cat Stevens, which were utilized on this soundtrack, was "Don't Be Shy," which opened up the movie, and then also "If You Want to Sing Out, Sing Out." The other songs were taken from the third and fifth albums of Cat Stevens' discography, if I'm not mistaken. And I mean, every single song in this movie is perfectly placed. I mean, long before they had like a music supervisor, long before they had somebody with that kind of title, this was an instance where, Hal Ashby, he just was a fan of Cat Stevens. And even though that, after Elton John left, he basically went to Cat Stevens and was basically like, do you have anything that you haven't really used yet? Or, that and he would basically give him all the unused songs that he had, and maybe we can tweak them later. But what Hal Ashby did, because he liked the rawness of those songs, of those tracks so much, because they weren't polished, he just threw them in the movie without telling Cat Stevens, and Cat Stevens was not really happy about that for a while. that he would just take these raw temp tracks of these songs that he had created, just sent to Hal Ashby out of the blue, like, maybe you can use this, and then if you like them, we can work with them later and actually perfect them. But no, Hal Ashby really liked the raw and real nature of the songs and felt just put them in as is, and that's exactly what he did. Excuse me a second. So yeah, but at any rate, so I mean, Harold and Maude, 50 years, I don't remember when I first saw this movie. Funnily enough, I never saw this in high school. I've read numerous times that there's a lot of teachers that actually try to get away with showing this movie. But at the same time, I don't think that I think there are definitely certain audiences out there that will still say no thank you to this, which is kind of a shame. Uh, Interestingly enough, on this new Blu-ray, and I was kind of surprised to see this, and this was something I wanted to talk about because it's not talked about at all on the Blu-rays at all, not on the commentaries, not on the interviews, nothing. The Motion Picture Association of America, the MPAA as it was known, is now simply the MPA, and they put a PG rating stamp right in front of the movie before it plays on this Paramount Blu-ray, and says, and I'm not kidding, it says above the PG rating, "Parents strongly cautioned." Now, I found that very, very interesting because usually on the official PG logos, it says "parental guidance suggested," but for some reason, for this particular PG movie, the MPA decided to say "parents strongly cautioned." Uh, I'm going to interpret that as they're just not fans of this movie, and they're kind of in their own little snarky way. They're trying to prevent anybody from seeing it because, to be perfectly honest, this is a PG rated movie. There's hardly anything objectionable. Originally, this was given an R just because there's a scene later down the road. It's a very important scene, which I will point out, where there was a sign that actually said "fuck war" on it. And because of the fact it just said "fuck war," that was enough for the MPA to say no, R rating. And you got to remember, this was during the Vietnam War. There's a scene right in this movie where he and the army guy, they're literally walking by a VA hospital. I'll point it out when we get to it. But right now, we have one of my favorite cameos in movies. This is Tom Skerritt, the legendary Tom Skerritt, who was later the star, or rather, first billed in Ridley Scott's Alien. And even though he wears these glasses and this helmet, you can't really recognize him. That voice should be really identifiable automatically. And he just did this movie as a favor to Hal Ashby. He's like, "Hey, I need somebody to play the cop. Will you play the cop for this role?" And the thing is that Tom Skerritt said, "Yes, I will do this role, but at the same time, I don't want to be billed. I don't want credit for this movie at all." Uh, and so he's in the credits, he's listed as M. Borman. Now, the logic behind that name is Martin Bormann was a Nazi who served as Hitler's private secretary during World War II. Bormann with two N's at the end of the last name or the surname. And when I realized a certain connection between another scene later down the road, which includes the "fuck war" sign, but that's now out of frame, it makes me think, oh my God, this is a massive connection. These two things really do connect. Why? Why did they use that name, Martin Bormann? Well, as you can see, the cop here is obviously very very upset at Maude because she basically said when he pulled her over, "Oh yeah, I don't have a license. I don't believe in them." And he just makes up all this stuff that he just can't believe he's hearing, that this woman, this lady is just driving around without a license with a tree that she took somewhere just because she just wants to replant it. She wants to give it another chance at life. That's all that this is about, and the cops always wanting to play games, in her own words. Now, we will see Tom Skerritt again in a minute, which is a glorious a compliment to that very funny scene earlier where she circles and manages to get away. But at any rate, anybody in the chat is out there want to comment on Harold and Maude? Let me know. I'll just do a timestamp real quick. We are at 51 minutes and 30 seconds. So if you want to jump ahead to the 51-minute mark and 51 minutes and 30 seconds, and we are officially halfway through Harold and Maude here. Now, as you can see, they planted the tree, so they're coming back, and they're gonna run past Tom Skerritt as the cop yet again. And but Tom Skerritt has been in a lot of good movies as well. I mean, I remember when he played the antagonist in Contact with Jodie Foster, the Robert Zemeckis movie, and he also played. A little movie called Ice Castles from 1978. He played the father of Lynn Holly Johnson, who was a real life ice skater. She was also in the James Bond film For Your Eyes Only. And so, yeah, he had a long career after this movie, and this was just when he was first starting out. Nobody knew really who he was, and but now he's been in a lot of films since then. I mean, but he's mainly known as the captain of the Nostromo in Alien. But he's very funny in this movie. It's like up to here with he's kind of limping a little bit. He's, Officer Murphy, yes. Dealing with all this nonsense that Maude is saying, and like he just thinks that she's just a crazy old lady. He really does. And how she basically criticized him for being officious. Yeah, that is the definitely the curse of of a government job. Absolutely. No. Wonderful. And like I said, this was all filmed around San Francisco. I mean, the house was a real house about 30 miles outside of the city. And yeah, and everything was pretty much on location. I mean, and Hal Ashby was not a storyboard kind of guy. I mean, he basically just worked with the actors and knew how to edit everything in the editing room. So, um, and smoking a lot of pot in the meantime. I mean, like I said, he was a chronic marijuana smoker, and uh, luckily through the power of cinema, it doesn't really show. So, but then again, I mean, this is considered like sort of like with Clockwork Orange is like considered the ultimate punk movie. There are those that consider Harold and Maude like the ultimate hippie movie. I mean, it was made at a time when people were protesting the war in Vietnam, and Nixon essentially made uh, marijuana a criminal offense just to get back at these protesters who were protesting the Vietnam War, which he very much was invested in. Look, I mean, controversial theory, but I've always believed that JFK was murdered by government officials who only wanted to go to war to make money. Because JFK refused to go to Vietnam. He did not want to bend down to forces in the government that wanted to go to Vietnam so badly and start bombing and everything. Oh, remember those glory days of World War II when we made so much money during that war? Well, we got to do it for Vietnam. And after JFK was assassinated, the very first meeting that Lyndon Johnson called, was over Vietnam. And also because of the incident that brought us into the Vietnam War. Later, in the Fog of War, it was revealed the documentary "The Fog of War," which won an Oscar. The secretary at the time, Robert S. McNamara, said that the incident that brought us in the Vietnam War, it never happened. It never happened. So 58,000 soldiers died, and probably over a million Vietnamese. They all died during the Vietnam War, and people were protesting. I mean, Al Ashby was very much against the war, as a lot of his fellow filmmakers were, like Coppola and Lucas. They were all against the Vietnam War. Hell, Lucas said that one of the reasons why he made Star Wars, because it's really deep down. It's really, I mean, yes, World War II in space. He was inspired by the old footage from the 40s and everything, but it was really the subtext was Vietnam. Sort of same way with MASH. It was the same thing where the evil galactic empire represented the American government, and the rebel alliance represented the Vietnamese. I mean, audiences in 1977 probably didn't put two and two together at that time, but that was really the inspiration. I mean, George Lucas has said on record that, that we were so wrong to go to Vietnam, so wrong. We have never offered an apology. And this is one of the major themes of Harold and Maude, which is, how, her mother tries to, get him with the army and everything, and how, he refuses to get into that lifestyle and everything. It's just, well, I mean, as we can see later, we'll see how he and Maude get out of that opening of him possibly getting into the service. But I mean, these attitudes are perfectly reflected from Colin Higgins' script and Hal Ashby through his direction. And this is just a powerful moment. I mean, Bud Cort really delivered this monologue really well. But what's funny is that, of course, like the 3-hour cut, this was like this speech went on for much, much longer. And it's one of those things where, they thought when they first saw the movie that it was going to be an absolute disaster, because, over 3 hours of all this stuff, and, not even any music at the time, because supposedly there's another version out there which doesn't have music at all, that Cameron Crowe talks about on his commentary. Believe me, pick up that Harold and Maude Blu-ray with that Cameron Crowe, Larry Karaszewski commentary, because it is awesome. Now, this second computer date right here, well, actually, I think this girl is actually very cute. I mean, it's like, I think when I first watched this movie, it's like, oh, come on, Harold. I mean, I think I was kind of like that. But she actually ended up marrying the producer, Charles Mulvihill. Sherry Summers, I believe, is her name was, that plays the second computer date. And as you can see, Harold has converted his new car that his mother gave him into a hearse, which is, very shocking. And obviously, it doesn't intimidate this computer date, I think, too much. But and apparently, according to Larry Karaszewski, Bud Cort actually did treat his mother with on-screen mother with a lot of antagonism, complete with middle fingers, flipping her the bird every now and then, just because he was doing that method acting kind of thing. And so he was basically being Harold even off camera, which Vivian Pickles, I don't think, really appreciated. But the producer on the first commentary on the Criterion still to this day thinks this is the funniest laugh in the movie. Although, to be perfectly honest, I mean, yeah, her reaction is priceless. It is absolutely priceless. And like I said, she actually married the producer, Charles Mulvihill, after this. So, I can understand if he wanted to give her that moment of glory. I mean, I'm sure that, that, I mean, it may be the funniest moment of the movie. I don't know. I mean, there's so many other funny moments in this though. And as you could see, Bud Cort is beginning to get just a little bit more color in his features and everything. After, of course, being with Maude and joyriding with her and planting trees and, having tea and pie and, doing all these things that he normally would not be doing. And of course, there's also the distinction of course, between the rich and the poor, and life and death, and just all these things which are beautifully embedded into Colin Higgins's script. Oh yeah, so this ride with the this entire sequence is great, but I mean, uh so I mean, he's still trying to recruit him to join the military. Oh, it's got its drawbacks, I guess. Yeah, like losing limbs and okay, yeah, this is the veterans hospital that I was talking about where they actually did shoot uh, where yeah, I mean these soldiers are really in a lot of pain and dying, pretty much all in the background here. Um, yeah, this is a VA hospital, and where a lot of Vietnam vets went to recuperate and recover, even though, but a lot of them died also, which is here again really sad. I mean, all that wasted on the war. It's oh man. But like I said, that was the time when this movie was made, and that was the radical attitudes that the hippie movement had at the time. I mean, let's put it this way: the on the polar opposites of the directing spectrum, you will see how Ashby all the way to one side, and then way over in the other side, you will have John Milius, who of course directed Conan the Barbarian and Red Dawn, and has that Second Amendment gung ho type of America fighting that kind of thing. Um, these directors are able to exhibit their attitudes of what was going on at the time into these films, and even if you don't make the connections, they still work for the story. I mean, Nathan Hale, it's like, oh, come on. It's, it's all fake. I mean, it's all lies. It's all BS. I mean, really. I mean, ugh. My recommendation to anybody that's interested in joining the military, just do it during peacetime. Just saying, do it during peacetime. Don't do it when a war is going on, especially when the war is unjustified. Like I said, there's a sign that was literally taken out of this movie to avoid an R rating, which simply said "fuck war." Yeah, this movie is for lovers, not fighters. And of course, in the last detail, which of course is centered around a couple of first class petty officers that have to transport a kleptomaniac seaman to the brig, played by Randy Quaid. Um, a lot of those military attitudes are absolutely 100% authentic, based on the book by Daryl Ponnickson, of course, but also in this weird era. I mean, I love the line in Last Detail where they're talking to the sailors when they're at a party, and like this one hippie says, "Now tell me just one thing you don't like about Nixon." That type of thing. And of course we see Nixon's picture um, right next to the right next to the army guy here, and yeah, here she is, Maude, with the sign for peace. And this, of course, was exactly what all the protesters were going for. I mean, I remember that famous shot of the flower, and everything that Zack Snyder put in the Watchmen opening sequence. That's the way it was. I mean, the government and Richard Nixon really hated the fact that people were against the war, and he was going to do everything in his power to punish these people, even though a lot of them were on college campuses protesting the Vietnam War and its devastation. I mean, it's still unbelievable how that war managed to last for 13 years. But like I said, people in Washington, they were making the money. They were making the money and treating the soldiers as if they were 100% expendable. Uh, like I said, it's all about the contractors making money. It's not. It's all about contractors and business deals and everything. And it has nothing to do with uh, fighting for the country. It was all about making money. It was just all about making money, which is really disgusting, considering all the loss of life and everything. And of course, this is about a movie about a kid who learns to embrace life, even though he seems to have nothing but inclinations for death. But as you can see, I mean, Harold and Maude as characters are going to get much more closer, much more romantic, much more intimate. And it is true that Hal Ashby actually shot a love scene. Um, yeah, I mean, there was a scene that he actually shot which featured um, Bud Cort and Ruth Gordon actually um, essentially making out together. Now, of course, all that's left of that scene is later when she's sleeping and he's just blowing bubbles. You know, happier than he's ever been in his life. Uh, that's all that's left of it. But of course, Paramount would never ever have considered. In fact, one of the big controversies, of course, one of the reasons why this film bombed so badly was also due to the marketing. Paramount had no idea how to market this movie, and when the producer Bob Evans realized that a kiss between the two principals was actually in the trailer, he said, "No, you can't do this. It's going to kill the movie. It's literally going to kill the movie." And they seriously had no idea, not a clue how to promote this. And honestly, I don't blame them. How do you promote this movie? I mean, seriously. And that's what I'm saying is that even though we had these small pockets around the country that embrace the movie, it's like when you try to recommend this movie to somebody and you tell somebody what it's about, it's like, oh, I mean, that's I don't know about that. It's a, yeah. I mean, whether it's due to the romantic relationship or whether it's just due to the fact that it's about suicide and death and everything. It's a black comedy about death, about life and death, and that's a very tough sell. It's a very, very tough sell. Okay, this is the famous scene I was talking about, bringing up to this, because in this scene is where the sign is that says "fuck war," but even more important than that sign is, of course, the fact that Harold notices very briefly on Maude's arm a uh, a number that had been stamped into her forearm, which is essentially a concentration camp number from the Holocaust. It's very brief. We see it for but a moment, and Hal Ashby just takes the camera away. This is a nice little connection to the Martin Bormann fake name that Tom Skerritt has as the cop. In fact, it's not even Martin Bormann, it's just M. Bormann without the second N. But what's interesting is that, I mean, Martin Bormann is also a more or less a character in Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. So, in two of my three favorite movies of all time, there is a nod to Martin Bormann. Um, I can only say that's a coincidence. Just saying. I think that is just a coincidence. But yeah, very, very sweet moment where, yeah, when you realize that she's a concentration camp survivor and that she is a free spirit, not a care in the world, and just wants to exhibit joy and experience joy and bring joy to everybody that she comes across, including Harold. It Wow. I mean, it really makes you think, and it really makes you love Maud all the more. Now here is the third and final computer date. Uh, who is she's an actress, and evidently, this actress whose name escapes me at the moment, I do apologize, but she eventually played Maude in a play version. Colin Higgins had adapted the script into a book and a play years after the movie came out, and she ended up playing Maude in one of those play versions. But this moment right here, where she slips in the hallway, completely accidental, completely accidental, and Hal Ashby just left it in. And that is definitely, in my book, one of the funniest moments in the movie. All three of the computer dates are hilarious, and they're just all hilarious. I love them. I absolutely love them. Now, of course, uh, Harold's suicidal shenanigans have kind of worked up until this point in terms of disgusting his own mother, as well as scaring away these computer dates. But for this third computer date, I think that he is about to get a shock, because the fact that she is an actress, I think that she is a little turned on, dare I say it, by this little performance that Bud Cort does with the knife. Uh, it's it's just brilliant. It's brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. I love it. He gets out this knife. Oh, this is just too good right here. It all right, just real quick to give everybody a timestamp, we are officially at 1 hour and 13 minutes. Actually, 1 hour, 13 minutes, and 20 seconds. And we have just a little about 25 minutes left here. Like I said, this is a very short movie. It's very, very short, and it's very, very sweet. And to think that that 3 hour cut is probably a nightmare. Interestingly enough, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is also considered a classic, just like this movie. Um, and there is supposedly in the Paramount vaults a 3 hour version, which has a lot more stuff with Steve Martin and John Candy. And in fact, Steve Martin's on-screen wife actually thinks that he's having an affair while he's with Del Griffith, of all things. And there's a lot of scenes of that in the movie that John Hughes just decided, no, just get rid of all this stuff. And they cut it down to a 92-minute comedy, which most comedies should be that long anyway. So, oh, God. Bud Cort is just wonderful. At first, you think that, oh my God, is she going to run away? Is she going to run away like the others? No. She's reminded of when she played Juliet at the Sunshine Playhouse. Ah, she really has nice hair. I like her sweater too. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, in my opinion, it would be impossible to. It would be impossible for me to pick among the computer dates 2 and 3 as to which one I like more, which one I would have tried to romance. In terms of. Um, I mean, I'd love to think that Bud Cort actually Harold actually comes around at the end and decides to uh, contact one of the other computer dates and try to get with them again. But and touching his face as she's falling down, it's so perfect. And of course, originally in the script, uh, the glass was supposed to be dropped by the butler, but the butler, who was a real butler, said, no, a butler would never do that. And so they had the mother drop the glass. That was your last date. Oh. Now, okay. Uh, excuse me, just 1 second here. Oh. Okay, so this is at a real park in San Francisco. I forget the name. Unfortunately, escapes me at the moment. But we're about to have a a little Hitchcock cameo by the director himself. That is Hal Ashby, with the beard and the hair and the glasses and the brown jacket. And just by the look of him, you could see how studio executives would have been freaked out by this guy. I mean, I mean, but I mean, by all counts, I mean, Hal Ashby was a very intelligent, very gentle soul. And like I said, I mean, I don't think anybody will have a run like he did in the 1970s with those 7 movies, those 7 essential Hal Ashby movies. I don't think anybody will ever have a run like that again. I just I don't see it happening. I mean, it's like when Harold Russell won the second Oscar at Best Years of Our Lives for the exact same role. It will never ever happen again. I just don't. I just don't. I mean, we've had some close ones. Like if you want to make an argument for David Fincher or Christopher Nolan or even Jeff Nichols is probably the closest that I can think of. You know, virtually every movie he's made, I think, has been brilliant. Everything from Mud to Loving to Midnight Special, Take Shelter. There's very, very few directors I can think of that just had a streak as Hal Ashby did in the 1970s. It's unbelievable what he was able to do with all of these scripts and apply just a magical formula where his genius as an editor and his way with working with actors and maybe a little inspiration from the marijuana, it just all combined. So I'll always know where it is. Yes, absolutely. And of the 7 Hal Ashby films from the 70s, I think this is without question my favorite. Well, I mean, it's my 3rd favorite movie of all time, so of course it's my favorite. But I do love all the other films as well. Although I still have to pick up that Criterion of In the Heat of the Night. That's the only one I have yet to get. So yeah, this is what's left of the love scene. Which here again, I mean, Hal Ashby shot a few scenes, but he knew that the studio would never, ever allow those scenes to be in the final cut. It just he knew it was going to be a fruitless endeavor to try and make these characters any more intimate that they are on screen. So this is all we have left. Oh hey, yeah, Dying Breed. Yeah, late to the party. How are things? Hey, great man, great. I mean, this is only a 91-minute movie, and so we're coming up near the end here. We're actually at 1 hour 20 minutes. We're approximately at 1 hour and 20 minutes in the final home stretch when we hear that last note coming after the last scene when Vivian Pickles is about to make a phone call. Ding, yeah, that's the signal for the third and final act when Harold actually confesses to his mother and everybody that he knows that I'm going to get married and this is the woman I'm going to marry. I suppose you think this is very funny, Harold. Her reaction, priceless. Priceless. I love the fact that there's a sunflower on the other side. Just, perfect. And he's 100% serious. He is going to marry Maude. He is absolutely going to do it. He doesn't give a damn what anybody's going to say or what anybody's about to say right here. Yep, we definitely makes things cooler. Absolutely. Okay, now see, here we have the three institutions. We got the military, we got the psychiatrists, both with their respective bosses in picture frames right next to their heads. And then we get to the priest, played by Eric Christmas, who Maude had stolen the Volkswagen Bug from him earlier. Here he is right here. Eric Christmas was in the funniest scenes in the history of cinema. Now, Bob Clark's Porky's has always been, you know, kind of dismissed as a very vulgar comedy. But to tell you the truth, there is one sequence in that movie which is so funny because it's all shot in one take. Eric Christmas is the high school principal in Porky's, and the gym teacher, Miss Ballbricker, comes to see Eric Christmas about all the boys looking in the holes through the shower and seeing all the girls naked. And over time, as she's telling this story and saying that we have to do a lineup to identify a mole on one of the boys' penises, of course, the gym teachers are all losing it. And eventually, Eric Christmas, who we just left saying buttocks, he started laughing in front of the gym teacher too, and she just got up and left, knowing that things were going to be fruitless at that point in trying to prosecute Tommy Turner, because one of the gym guys said, maybe we should bring in a sketch artist and put his picture of his penis all over the school and see if have you seen this prick? It was last seen hanging out in the gym at Angel Beach High. But it's all one shot. There's no breaks in it whatsoever. Bob Clark directed it, and it's just genius. And we have, when it zooms up and we see Eisenhower with the giant shit-eating grin on his face, it's the perfect capper to one of the funniest scenes in the history of cinema. Like I said, Porky's isn't great overall, but that one scene should be celebrated more as a perfect example of comedy on film and how to do it right in terms of editing, in terms of just getting the dialogue right, getting the performances right. And by the way, the laughing by the gym teachers on the back, all improvised. All improvised. They were all laughing for real because they just couldn't handle it. And Bob Clark just let the camera roll. Just let the camera roll. Yep. So, yeah. So here we are. We're entering the final 10 minutes after Eric Christmas gets disgusted at the idea of this relationship being consummated. But he can go screw himself, whatever. And we realized that Maude had been planning her death all this time, that she had planned to take sleeping pills on her 80th birthday. And she's finally confessing to Harold here. It's a shocker. It's a shocker. I was not expecting this ending to come out of nowhere like it did. And so we have Cat Stevens' song Trouble being played over this montage, which was originally, of course, much longer. And, filled with lots of superfluous dialogue. But here we get to the heart of the entire movie, where she tells him, where Harold tells Maude that he loves her, and Maude just says in response, "That's wonderful. Now go love some more." Very, very profound words in a very, very black comedy. Oh man. Yeah, it's perfect. I mean, Cat Stevens' song "Trouble" being played as he's driving his hearse, and Maude is being admitted in the hospital, and we know she's going to die. I mean, we know that that it's really the end of the line for her. She's holding the flower in her hand. Oh, it's wonderful. It's just wonderful. Uh, and Harold is just, of course, not accepting this at all. Really not accepting this at all. And now it is true that in the original script, in Colin Higgins's original script, that Harold does actually commit suicide at the end. He actually does drive the car over the cliff into the rocks, and he kills himself for real. And there was a massive debate. Well, first of all, there was a massive debate about keeping the concentration camp number on her arm, keeping that in the movie. That was back and forth between the studio. Should we leave that in? Should we not leave that in? But the ending of this movie, you got to think that, he has all these suicide attempts in the beginning, and they're all a joke, all to get his mother's attention. But imagine if this movie had ended where he actually does commit suicide and it's not a joke. I don't think this movie would have any of the cult success that it celebrates today if that ending had stayed in. I don't see that happening at all. Uh, they made the right choice. They let him live. He is inspired by Maude to continue with his life, play music, you know, meet people and show them love and compassion, things which he had never experienced before. Before he had met Maude, he had never really experienced any kind of real love and compassion and heartache. And, now he's just going through a very dark period as he comes to terms with the fact that the woman that he fell in love with, the very first woman that he fell in love with, has uh, ended her life voluntarily. But the suspense in this sequence has always been very palpable, where he's driving, speeding like hell up the dirt road. The music has stopped. He has a very odd expression on his face. We can't really read what he's thinking. And then we see the cliff. And this was always a mistake, and it always bothered Hal Ashby. But yeah, unfortunately, they only got a freeze frame of the car before it actually hit the ground and smashed the car. And you think, well, was he in there? Was he not in there? And we do a slow pan back up, and we see Harold with the banjo. And I can imagine a lot of audiences breathing sighs of relief at this point. But, here again, it's a celebration of music, it's a celebration of life, it's a celebration of love. That's what this movie is all about. And that's why it's become so utterly beloved over the past 50 years. Uh, but just imagine for a moment being a critic in 1971 and seeing A Clockwork Orange and Harold and Maude back to back on the very days that they open. Like, I can't imagine a better time in history than to be a film critic at that point, because yeah, to see those two films when they first came out in 1971, that would have been so epic. Yeah. So this is the end of Hal Ashby's Harold and Maude, a true American classic, and still funny, still moving and inspiring after all these years. And it's a film that will be talked about another 50 years from now. I'm pretty damn sure. Like A Clockwork Orange, this is a film that's never going to die. I don't think it's ever going to lose its audience. I think it will always be a timeless miracle of a movie where there's nothing else like it. It's very odd, it's very strange, but it's also irresistible, I think. Every song, perfect. Every song is wonderful. And here we have the cast. Uh, Very quick on credits. I mean, it only goes up to halfway to the screen. I don't know what the rationale behind was that, aside from maybe the sky and everything, and how Ashby thought that the sky would have just drowned out the credits anyway. But yeah, that is how Ashby's Harold and Maude. I mean, a wonderful film. I'm so happy whoever's still here that you watched the movie with me. I really appreciate it. So I think I will let everybody know right now before I end the broadcast that yeah, Saturday night, Christmas Day, I will do a double audio commentary for the Ref as well as Black Christmas, and I think I will start. I think I'll start at 9 p.m. I think we'll shoot for 9 p.m. for this Saturday night. Next weekend, I plan on doing commentaries for, at the very least, Diamonds Are Forever, the James Bond movie, which was Sean Connery's last uh, time in that role. And then also a Richard Brooks movie called Dollars, which the title is just basically the dollar sign and not spelled out as dollars. That movie stars Warren Beatty and Goldie Hawn and is marked by a car chase that lasts about 20%, the last 20% of the movie. So that's what I plan on doing next weekend. So I hope to see you all then, Saturday night at 9 p.m. for the Ref and Black Christmas 1974. And then next weekend, Sunday and Monday, it will be Diamonds Are Forever as well as Dollars. Thank you again for joining me. This has been wonderful. You know, I love this movie, and I hope that you all have discovered this movie too, and get that Blu-ray. Get this brand new Blu-ray from Paramount with the commentary with Cameron Crowe and Larry Karaszewski, because it's wonderful. So, other than that, thank you very much for joining.